Most people work their whole lives and never figure out why they can't get ahead financially. Retirement just feels like this thing that's always out of reach no matter how hard they work. And even when they're making decent money, they're still living paycheck to paycheck with nothing to show for it. Here's the thing though, it's not that you don't earn enough, and you're not even being irresponsible in the traditional sense. The real problem is nobody ever taught you to think about money mathematically instead of emotionally. I'm about to show you something that quantitative investors and people who retire early actually use. And once you get it, you'll never look at a price tag the same way again. It's called the 16x rule, and it's brutally simple but absolutely profound. Every dollar you save and invest in your 30s will be worth about $16 by the time you hit traditional retirement age, assuming you put it in diversified index funds and just let it ride with historical market returns. This isn't me being optimistic or speculating. This is just math, exponential math, based on compound growth over a 30 to 35-year timeline. Let me break down why this works and why it's literally the secret that separates people who achieve financial independence from those who work until they're 70. The whole thing rests on what Einstein supposedly called the most powerful force of the universe, compound interest. But here's what most people miss about compounding. It's not a straight line, which means the growth doesn't happen steadily, but in this upward curve that gets more and more dramatic as time goes on. When you invest $1 in your 30s in a low-cost index fund, history shows you'll get around 7 to 10% returns annually after inflation. Let's use 8% because it's conservative and accounts for market ups and downs. First year, your dollar becomes $1. 0.8. Not exciting, just 8 cents of growth. But here's where it gets interesting. Year 2, you're not earning 8% on your original dollar. You're earning 8% on $0.08, so now you've got $1.17. By year 10, that single dollar is $2.16. By year 20, it's $4.66. By year 30, roughly your mid-30s to mid-60s, that dollar is turned into $10.06. Wait, you're thinking, you said 16, not 10, right? So the 16 by figure accounts for a slightly longer horizon, about 35 years from age 30 to 65. And it factors in that you're probably not just investing once and forgetting about it, you're adding money regularly, which means you get this compounding effect on all your contributions over time. The math is solid. A dollar properly invested in your 30s really does become about $16 by retirement. And this is how financially sophisticated people think about every single purchase they make. Now here's where this becomes a weapon for early retirement. The 16x rule isn't just some cool math fact you learn and forget. It's a practical tool you use every time you're about to buy something to cut through all the emotional BS your brain uses to justify spending. Your brain is wired for immediate gratification, for looking successful, for comfort, for fitting in. So when you see a price tag, your emotional brain runs a completely different calculation than your rational brain should be running. You see a $7 latte, and your emotional brain goes, it's just $7. I work hard. I deserve this. Everyone buys coffee. This won't make or break me, but what your rational brain, armed with the 16 by rule, suddenly looks different, doesn't it? You're not choosing between $7 and $0. You're choosing between 15 minutes of caffeine versus $112 of future freedom. This is the psychological shift that changes everything. Because once you start running this calculation automatically, you see through the illusion that keeps most people financially trapped. Let's scale this up to bigger purchases, because this is where it gets truly brutal. Imagine you're 32 and deciding between 2 cars, a reliable used car for $30,000 or a luxury vehicle that makes you feel successful for $100,000. Most people make this choice based on feelings, how the car makes them look, what it says about their success, the comfort and status. But let's run the math. The difference is $70,000 times 16 is $1, $12 million. Read that again. By choosing the luxury car, you're not spending an extra $70,000, you're sacrificing $1. $12 million of retirement wealth. You're trading 7 figures of future freedom for a metal box. That'll be worth maybe a quarter of what you paid in 10 years, all because you wanted to feel successful today instead of being successful tomorrow. This is the brutal truth financially independent people understand, and what keeps everyone else trapped in financial sleepwalking, going through life making purchase after purchase without ever calculating the real cost, without multiplying by 16, without asking if the temporary emotion is worth the permanent loss. The 16x rule exposes lifestyle inflation for the retirement-destroying force it actually is. Because every time you upgrade your lifestyle, bigger house, nicer car, fancier vacations, premium subscriptions, designer clothes, eating out constantly, you're not just spending more now, you're obliterating exponentially more wealth in the future. A $200 monthly car payment upgrade doesn't cost $200. It costs $2,400 annually, which is about $38,400 of retirement wealth over 35 years. A $500/month apartment upgrade costs $6,000 per year, which translates to $96,000 of lost retirement wealth. These numbers seem impossible until you actually run them. Then you realize why so many people making six figures still can't retire. They've been spending their 16x multiplier on consumption instead of investing it. Now, I'm not saying you need to live like a monk or become some miserable penny pincher who never enjoys life. It's about being conscious and intentional. It's about making deliberate trade-offs with full awareness of what you're actually choosing. And if you genuinely value that luxury car more than $1, 12 million of retirement wealth, fine, buy it. But make that choice with your eyes open. Run the math. Understand the trade-off. What the 16x rule prevents is unconscious spending, autopilot consumption, death by 1,000 small purchases that seem insignificant alone, but are catastrophic when you add them up. Think about the daily stuff most people dismiss as irrelevant. $15 for lunch instead of bringing food from home, $5 for coffee, $2 for that streaming service you barely use, $8 for premium app features you don't need, $20 for delivery instead of picking up food yourself. These feel trivial. Individually they are, but let's run the annual math. If you're spending an extra $20 per day on small convenience purchases, and honestly, most people spend way more, that's $7, $300 annually. Times 16, you just discovered your small daily habits are costing you $116,800 of retirement wealth. You could retire years earlier. You could have complete financial freedom. You could tell your boss exactly what you think and walk out forever. But instead, you traded all that future power for the convenience of not planning your meals or brewing your own coffee. This is why people are financially sleepwalking. They're making dozens of small decisions every week without multiplying by 16, without calculating the real cost, without asking if their present self should have veto power over their future self's freedom. The 16x rule creates what behavioral economists call present-future alignment. It forces you to consider your future self's welfare instead of sacrificing that person's freedom for momentary pleasure today. And here's something most people don't think about. Your future self is a real person who's going to exist, who's going to have needs and desires and dreams, and every unconscious purchase you make today is essentially stealing from that person. It's wild when you think about it like that. You're literally taking money out of future you's pocket and using it to buy stuff that present you will forget about in a week. That's not being smart with money, that's being selfish to yourself. The 16 rule forces you to have a conversation between present you and future you before every purchase. And when you frame it that way, suddenly a lot of spending starts to feel pretty ridiculous. Here's another thing that'll blow your mind. The 16 vice rule actually gets more powerful the more you use it, because it's not just about individual purchases. It's about the cumulative effect of changing hundreds or thousands of purchasing decisions over years. Every time you choose not to spend $50 and invest it instead, that's $800 in retirement wealth. Do that twice a week, and you're looking at $83,200 over 35 years. Do it 5 times a week, and you're at $200. Start applying this to bigger decisions. Choosing a $1 $500/month apartment instead of a $2,000/month one saves you $6,000 annually, which is $96,000 of retirement wealth. But if you do that for 10 years before buying a house, you've actually saved $960,000 in retirement wealth, because each year's savings gets its own compounding timeline. The math gets exponentially more powerful the earlier you start and the more consistently you apply it, which is why people who internalize this rule in their late 20s or early 30s can retire in their 40s, while people who ignore it until their 50s are still working at 70. Let me give you some real-world scenarios to make this even clearer. Say you're thinking about upgrading your phone every year versus every 3 years. A new flagship phone costs around $0.000. So upgrading annually versus every 3 years means you're spending an extra $2.0000 every 3 years, or about $667 annually. Times 16, that's $672 of retirement wealth you're sacrificing for the privilege of having the newest phone a couple years earlier than necessary. Is that worth it? For some people, maybe, but for most people, once they see that number, the answer is obviously no. Or think about subscriptions. You've probably got a gym membership you use twice a month, a few streaming services you rotate through, some app subscriptions you forgot you even have, maybe a meal kit service, premium music service, cloud storage you don't really need. Let's say that adds up to $150/month in subscriptions you could live without. That's $1,800 annually, which translates to $28,800 retirement wealth. Cut those subscriptions and redirect that money to index funds, and you've just bought yourself an extra year of retirement, maybe more. Or consider eating out. If you're spending $200/week on restaurants and takeout when you could make similar meals at home for $75/week, that's $125/week saved, or $6,500 annually, which is $104,000 retirement wealth over 35 years. $104,000. That's not depriving yourself. That's just being conscious about when you're actually getting value from eating out versus when you're just being lazy or seeking comfort. Here's where it gets even more interesting. The 16 bites rule doesn't just apply to spending. It applies to debt, which is compounding working against you. When you carry a credit card balance at 18% interest, every dollar of debt is multiplying exponentially in the wrong direction. And every dollar you use to pay interest is losing its 16x growth potential. If you're paying $500 per month in credit card interest because you financed a lifestyle you couldn't afford, that's $660,000 annually, which is $96,000 of lost retirement wealth. And that's not even counting the compounding cost of the debt itself. But it's actually worse than that, because you're getting hit twice, once by losing the 16x growth potential of the money you're spending on interest, and again by the exponential growth of the debt itself working against you. It's like you're trying to fill a bathtub while someone's pulling the drain plug wider and wider. This is why getting out of high interest debt should be your absolute first priority before you even think about investing, because you're essentially getting a guaranteed 18% return by paying off that debt, which is way better than the 8% average you'd get from the market. The 16x rule makes this brutally clear debt isn't just bad for your monthly cash flow, it's catastrophic for your long-term wealth building. Let's talk about housing for a minute, because this is where people make some of their biggest mistakes with the 16 days rule. You'll hear people say, rent is throwing money away, and you should buy the biggest house you can afford because it's an investment, but that's not how financially savvy people think about it. When you're deciding between renting and buying, or between a modest house and a bigger one, you need to run the 16x calculation on the difference. If you can rent a nice place for $1, $800/month, or buy a similar place with a mortgage payment of $2/month once you factor in property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and opportunity costs of the down payment, that $700/month difference is $8,400 annually, which is $134,400 of retirement wealth over 35 years. Now, yes, you're building equity in the house, but you're also losing the 16x growth potential on that extra monthly payment. And on the down payment, you could have invested. The math gets complicated, but the point is, you can't just blindly assume buying is always better. You need to run the numbers. And when it comes to house size, the difference between a $300,000 house and a $500,000 house isn't just $200,000, it's $3. $2 million in retirement wealth if you're 30 years old. That's the difference between retiring at 45 and working until 65. Think about that next time someone tries to sell you on buying more house than you need. Your financial future isn't determined by what you earn, but by your discipline in protecting the 16x growth potential of every dollar you keep. You can earn $200, 0.000000000, or earn $70, 0.000, and retire a millionaire if you invest the difference between earnings and a modest lifestyle. The 16 vice rule makes this crystal clear. Wealth isn't about income. It's about the gap between income and spending, multiplied by time and compounding. I've seen people making $250, 0.000 a year, who are stressed about money because they've inflated their lifestyle to match their income. They've got the big house, the luxury cars, the private schools, the expensive vacations, the country club membership, and at the end of the year, they've saved almost nothing. Meanwhile, I know people making $65,000 who are on track to retire at 50 because they kept their lifestyle modest and invested the difference. The second group understands something the first group doesn't. Every dollar you spend on lifestyle inflation is a dollar that can't compound for your future. Let me give you the practical framework for implementing this starting today. Because understanding the math is useless if you don't change your behavior. First, for every purchase over $50, stop and multiply the price by 16 before you buy. Write it down if you need to. Look at the number. Ask yourself if this is worth X dollars of retirement wealth. Sometimes the answer will be yes, if it's an investment in your health, education, earning power, or something that genuinely brings lasting value. But most of the time, once you see the 16 by number, the answer will be a clear no. Second, audit your recurring monthly expenses and multiply each by 200 to see its annual 16 by impact. That's $70 gym membership you never use. Use $16, 800 of retirement wealth annually. That 150 cable package is $36,000 annually. And suddenly, cutting these doesn't feel like sacrifice. It feels like buying back years of your life. Third, make the 16x rule visible. Set your phone wallpaper to multiply by 16, put a sticky note on your credit card. Create a spreadsheet tracking purchases and their 16x equivalent. The goal is to interrupt the emotional autopilot that drives most spending and force your rational brain to engage before your emotional brain justifies the purchase. Fourth, redirect every dollar you don't spend into automatic investment in low-cost index funds. The 16x rule only works if you actually invest the money you save rather than spending it on something else. Set up automatic transfers so the money never sits around tempting you. Fifth, calculate your personal savings rate. That's the percentage of your after-tax income that you're investing, and work on increasing it by 5% every 6 months until you hit at least 30%, ideally 50% or more, if you want to retire really early. The math is simple. If you save 10% of your income, you need to work 9 years to fund 1 year of retirement. If you save 50%, you only need to work 1 year to fund 1 year of retirement. See how powerful that is? Sixth, track your net worth monthly and watch it grow. There's something psychologically powerful about seeing that number increase every month. It reinforces the behavior and makes the sacrifices feel worth it. You start to get addicted to watching your investments grow instead of getting dopamine hits from buying stuff. The 16x rule is particularly powerful for people in their 30s because that's when you have maximum compounding runway. Every year you delay, you lose multiplier power. $1 invested at 35 becomes $16 at 65. At 45, it only becomes $8. At 55, only $4. This is why early retirement is overwhelmingly achieved by people who develop high savings rates in their 30s and early 40s. They're capturing the maximum multiplier before it decays. But even if you're past your 30s, the principle still applies. Just calculate your own multiplier based on your age and plan retirement. And the truth remains, every dollar you invest today is worth many multiples at retirement. And every dollar you spend today sacrifices those multiples forever. If you're 40, your multiplier might be 10x instead of 16x. If you're 50, it might be the exact number. It doesn't matter as much as the principle. Every dollar has exponential growth potential that you're either capturing or destroying. With each spending decision, here's something else people don't talk about enough. The 16x rule also applies to your career decisions and your earning potential. If you invest $5, 000 in a certification or course that increases your income by $10, 00000 annually, that's $160, 000 of retirement wealth, or $1 investment. That's a 32x return, double the normal multiplier. Or if you spend an extra hour a day for a year developing a skill that gets you promoted with a $20 000 raise, and you invest that extra income, you're looking at $320, 000 of retirement wealth from what amounts to about 365 hours of effort. The 16x rule shows you that investing in yourself and your earning power can be even more valuable than just cutting expenses, because you're expanding the gap between earnings and spending from both sides. But here's the trap. When people get raises or bonuses, they almost always inflate their lifestyle to match, which completely negates the benefit. You get a $15 000 raise, and suddenly you're looking at nicer apartments, nicer cars, fancier restaurants, and at the end of the year, you're saving the same amount or less than before. This is called lifestyle inflation or lifestyle creep, and it's one of the biggest wealth destroyers out there. The smart move when you get a raise is to immediately increase your automatic investment by that amount, so you never see the money in your checking account and never get used to having it to spend. A $15,000 raise invested annually is $240,000 of retirement wealth. Don't throw that away on a nicer car lease. Here's the deepest truth about the 16x rule. This isn't fundamentally about money, it's about freedom. Every dollar you spend unconsciously is a small piece of your future freedom you're trading for a momentary emotional hit. Every time you multiply by 16 and choose to invest instead of consume, you're buying back time. Time you won't have to spend working for someone else, tolerating a job you hate, living by someone else's schedule, suppressing your opinions to keep a paycheck coming. Financial independence isn't about being rich. It's about having enough invested that your money generates sufficient returns to cover your living expenses without selling your time and dignity for a salary. The 16x rule is the tool that gets you there decades earlier than you thought possible. Not by earning more, though that helps, but by protecting the exponential growth potential of every dollar from consumption's gravitational pull. Think about what financial independence actually means in practice. It means waking up without an alarm clock because you don't have to be anywhere. It means choosing projects you find meaningful instead of tasks someone assigns you. It means traveling in the middle of the week when flights and hotels are cheap and destinations aren't crowded. It means telling toxic people exactly what you think without fear of getting fired. It means pursuing your actual interests and passions instead of whatever pays the bills. It means spending time with your kids while they're young instead of missing their childhood because you're stuck in meetings. That's what you're actually buying when you invest instead of spend. You're not just accumulating money, you're accumulating freedom, autonomy, time, and peace of mind. And here's the beautiful part. Once you hit your financial independence number, you don't even have to stop working if you don't want to. You can keep working, but now it's optional, which changes the entire psychological dynamic. You're no longer dependent on that paycheck. So you can take risks, negotiate harder, walk away from bad situations, pursue passion projects that might not pay much. The money you earn becomes bonus wealth instead of survival necessity. This is the ultimate form of career leverage. And you can't buy it with a fancy car or a big house. You can only get it by consistently investing and letting compounding do its work. Your financial future isn't being determined by market crashes, economic conditions, or your salary. It's being determined right now, in this moment, by whether you multiply by 16 before you spend, or let your emotional brain trade your future self's freedom for your present self's fleeting pleasure. Most people will watch this video, feel momentarily inspired, then go right back to financial sleepwalking, spending unconsciously, never running the numbers, wondering decades from now why retirement never arrived. The people who actually achieve early retirement internalize the 16x rule so deeply it becomes automatic. They see every price tag through the lens of compound opportunity cost, treat their investment accounts as sacred and their spending as the enemy of future freedom. The mathematical secret to early retirement isn't a secret at all. It's the simple, brutal, beautiful truth that every dollar is a seed that can grow into $16 if you have the discipline to plant it instead of eat it. And the cumulative effect of thousands of these small decisions is the difference between financial freedom in your 40s or financial dependence in your 70s. The choice and the 16 times multiplier are yours. And every single day, you're either moving closer to freedom or further away from it with every purchase decision you make. Start multiplying by 16 today. And I promise you, 5 years from now, you'll look back and thank yourself for making the shift. Your future self is counting on you. Don't let them down.